chaos at the hospital, emotions exploding in every direction, and a confrontation that no one saw coming. This is the kind of reality-shaking drama that has left fans completely stunned. Picture this: Kirk Frost slipping quietly into the maternity ward to see Jasmine's baby girl, thinking he could keep it low-key, unnoticed, hidden away from the prying eyes of the public. But secrets have a way of spilling, and before he could even catch his breath, Rashida walked through those hospital doors, her heels clicking against the polished floor like a warning shot. The energy in that building shifted instantly. Nurses whispering, visitors staring, and even the newborns seemed to cry louder as if they sensed the storm about to hit. Fans are saying this was not just another argument, not just another messy chapter in their marriage, but a showdown that could finally shatter everything they've built. And the way it unfolded has everyone asking one question: how much more betrayal can Rashida take before she finally walks away for good? The moment was electric, like a movie scene, only it was painfully real for those inside the hospital. Rashida's face, calm but ice-cold, carried the weight of every heartbreak, every rumor, every sleepless night spent wondering if the man she called her husband could ever truly change. And Kirk, his eyes darted like a trapped man, caught between his wife and the mother of the child he thought he could quietly visit without consequence. People in the waiting room held their breath, phones discreetly raised to capture what was bound to be an unforgettable explosion. For fans watching from afar, the shockwaves were immediate. Social media erupted with disbelief, speculation, and fierce debates about loyalty, betrayal, and the limits of forgiveness. What happened next? When Rashida finally opened her mouth, turned a private hospital visit into one of the most public scandals of their entire journey. And trust me, you won't believe how far the chaos went. The hospital air was thick with tension the moment Rashida appeared in the doorway, her presence sharp and commanding. And it was clear to everyone watching that this was not a casual visit but the eruption of something that had been boiling beneath the surface for months. Kirk had walked into that ward earlier with a nervous shuffle, trying to keep his head down as he made his way toward Jasmine's room. The weight of secrecy pressing down on him, convinced that if he moved carefully enough, he could keep the truth from spilling into the world. He leaned over Jasmine's baby girl with a half-smile, whispering words that no one else could hear. And in that tender moment he thought he was safe, thought no one would notice, thought he could maintain the fragile balance he had been pretending to hold together. But Rashida's sudden appearance turned that illusion into dust. Her eyes locked on him immediately, a gaze colder than the sterile white walls around them. And every step she took toward him felt like a thunderclap echoing in his chest. People in the hallway slowed, some pretending to check their phones while sneaking glances, others whispering behind cupped hands, because everyone knew the story of Kirk and Rashida. Everyone knew the rumors about Jasmine, and everyone sensed that they were witnessing history in the making, a moment that would be replayed and dissected long after the night was over. Kirk's throat tightened as he tried to gather words that wouldn't come. But Jasmine, sitting in the hospital bed with her baby nestled in her arms, spoke first. Her voice firm but trembling around the edges. She deserves to know the truth. Kirk, you can't keep hiding forever. The words sliced the air, and Rashida's jaw clenched so hard it looked like stone. She didn't shout at first, didn't throw accusations or create the scene people expected. Instead, she let silence hang, a silence more dangerous than any outburst, and when she finally spoke, her tone was low, almost calm, but filled with fire. So this is what you've been doing? This is the business you couldn't talk about. Visiting her, visiting this child, while I'm at home holding our family together. Her voice rose on that last word, family, and the sound seemed to rattle the walls. Kirk stepped forward instinctively, hands raised as though to shield himself from the storm he knew he had no power to stop, his words spilling out in a desperate rush. Rashida, please, look. It's not what it looks like. I just wanted to see if everything was okay. The baby, but before he could finish, she cut him off with a sharp laugh. A sound that carried more hurt than humor, a laugh that told everyone present that years of betrayal were now crashing to the surface. Not what it looks like. Kirk, do you even hear yourself anymore? Do you think I'm blind? Do you think all these people don't see exactly what's happening here? By now, the room was buzzing with energy, the nurses exchanging nervous glances, security pacing nearby but hesitant to intervene because this wasn't just any argument, this was drama that stretched far beyond hospital walls. Drama that fans had followed for years on television screens and gossip blogs. Jasmine lowered her eyes, shifting the baby protectively in her arms. But even her silence carried weight, as though she was waiting for Kirk to finally admit what everyone already knew. The tension was unbearable, and just when it seemed like Kirk might break down, Rashida turned to Jasmine, her voice cutting through the air with precision. "And you sat there and let this happen, let him sneak around, let him drag me through the mud again. You knew what kind of destruction this would cause, and you didn't care. You let him come to you while our marriage burned." Jasmine's eyes flickered with guilt, but she didn't back down. "I didn't make him come here, Rashida, he came on his own." "Maybe you should ask yourself why." The room gasped collectively at that boldness, a ripple of shock running through everyone present. Because Jasmine had just shifted the weight of responsibility back onto Kirk. And Rashida's gaze snapped back to her husband like a spotlight, exposing a criminal. Kirk's face was pale, his hands trembling as he tried to hold everything together, but his words stumbled out weak and hollow. I just wanted to make sure she was okay, that's all. I didn't mean for this to blow up like this." But the excuses only poured fuel on the fire. Rashida's voice cracked with emotion as she shouted, "You didn't mean for it to blow up, Kirk. Everything you touch blows up because you can't stop lying. Because you can't stop chasing shadows and leaving me to clean up the pieces." Her voice echoed down the hallway, and now strangers were gathered just outside the door, whispering, recording, hungry for every detail of this collapse in real time. Fans online, once the videos surfaced, would be shocked beyond belief. Hashtags exploding across social media, arguments breaking out between those who defended Kirk and those who demanded Rashida finally walk away. But in that moment inside the hospital, the focus was not on outsiders but on the raw devastation unfolding between husband and wife. Rashida's hands trembled, her eyes glistening but refusing to release tears. Because she had cried enough behind closed doors, had given Kirk enough chances, had believed enough empty promises. This was not just another fight. This was a breaking point. She leaned closer, her voice dropping into a whisper so sharp that even the softest ears in the room could hear. "I gave you everything, Kirk, my loyalty, my love, my life, and you threw it away for this. For another scandal, another secret child, another lie I didn't ask for." Kirk swallowed hard, his eyes wet, his lips trembling as though he wanted to beg, to apologize, to reach out and hold her hand. But before he could, Rashida stepped back, her arms folding tightly as though she was protecting herself from the man she once trusted more than anyone else. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably, her baby fussing against her chest. And for a moment, the cries of the infant filled the silence, a haunting reminder of innocence caught in the middle of chaos. The nurses tried to calm the child, but no amount of soothing could drown out the reality that the lives of everyone in that room were being torn apart in front of countless witnesses. Kirk tried again, his voice breaking. "Rashida, I swear, to you, I didn't mean for it to be this way, I just wanted," but she cut him off once more, her voice shaking, but resolute. "You wanted to have it both ways, Kirk. You wanted to be the doting husband in front of the cameras and the loyal father at home, while sneaking around here, building another life you never intended to tell me about. You wanted me to stay blind, but I see everything now. Everything." Her words rang like a verdict, final and damning, and in that instant, Kirk looked smaller than ever, shrinking under the weight of the truth he could no longer escape. Fans who would later watch the videos could feel the heartbreak in her voice. The exhaustion of a woman who had been dragged through betrayal after betrayal, and while some might still hope for reconciliation, most could see that something fundamental had shattered that could never be put back together. The hospital staff, caught in the storm, moved quietly around the edges, but no one dared to intervene. Because this was more than an argument, it was history, scandal, tragedy, and spectacle, all at once, and everyone knew that when the dust settled, nothing between Rashida and Kirk would ever be the same again. The silence after Rashida's words was so thick it almost felt physical, pressing against Kirk's chest until he could barely breathe. And everyone in the room knew that whatever he said next could either pour gasoline on the fire or perhaps, in some desperate miracle, cool it down enough to prevent total collapse. But Kirk had never been good at timing, and the crack in his voice betrayed him as he whispered, "I just wanted to do right by her too." That single line set off a shockwave, because to Rashida, it sounded like a confession. An admission that the life she thought was theirs alone had been quietly shared with another woman and another child. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Someone muttered, "Oh no he didn't," and Jasmine's lips parted as though she herself couldn't believe he had said it aloud. Rashida's body stiffened, her eyes flashing like lightning, and for the first time that night, her voice thundered, without restraint, "Do right by her. Do right by her. What about me, Kirk? What about the years I spent holding you down? Protecting you from your own mess, defending you to the world while you were out here planting seeds you couldn't even water." The hallway outside stirred like a hive of bees, phones lifted, higher now, recording from different angles. The gossip machine already spinning as hashtags were born before the argument even ended. Kirk reached out, his hand trembling. But Rashida recoiled as though his touch was poison, and Jasmine, though silent, sat up straighter, clutching her baby as though she, too, needed protection from the storm of emotions raging across the room. At that moment, the baby began to cry again, high-pitched and piercing. And Rashida turned her gaze toward the child, her lips trembling. The sight of innocence cutting her in ways Kirk's betrayal never could. She whispered almost to herself, "That baby didn't ask for this." And for a fleeting second, her expression softened. But just as quickly the hardness returned, because she knew Kirk's choices had put them all here, and nothing could erase that truth. Jasmine seized that small window, her voice low but steady. "She didn't ask for it, and neither did I. Kirk made his choices. Rashida, don't put all of this on me." Rashida's eyes snapped toward her, a mixture of fury and disbelief swirling like a storm, and the room braced for another explosion. "You think you're innocent. You think you don't carry blame for sneaking around with a married man, for letting him step foot in your life when you knew he belonged in mine. Don't tell me you didn't know what this would do." Jasmine's chin lifted defiantly though, her voice wavered. "I didn't force him. I didn't chase him. He came on his own, and maybe you should stop blaming everyone else for his decisions." The audacity of her words made a nurse gasp audibly, and Rashida took a step closer, her anger vibrating through the floor. "Say that again," she demanded, her tone deadly calm. And Kirk suddenly pushed himself between them, his arms out like a desperate shield. "Enough. Stop it, both of you. This is not the place, this is not the time." But his pleas were swallowed by the noise of onlookers, the baby's cries, and Rashida's own rage, which refused to be silenced. "Not the place," she repeated, her voice rising again. "When is the place, Kirk? When you're hiding in hotel rooms? When you're sneaking out at midnight? Or maybe when you're visiting a baby behind my back, pretending you're still the man I married? Don't tell me about timing. You made this the place, when you walked in here like you didn't have a wife waiting at home." Kirk's face flushed, his eyes darting around as though looking for an exit that didn't exist. And he muttered, "I'm trying to fix this," but the words landed flat, meaningless, because no one believed them anymore. Fans who would later watch the leaked clips would tear apart every syllable, analyzing the guilt in his tone, the hollowness of his promises. And many would say this was the moment the public finally lost faith in him altogether. Inside the room, however, there was no time for public opinion, there was only raw heartbreak spilling out faster than anyone could contain. Rashida's breathing was heavy now, her chest rising and falling as though she had just sprinted through years of lies. And then, in a voice so broken it silenced even the murmurs in the hallway, she said, "You've humiliated me enough. Kirk, I can't keep doing this. I won't." Those words, simple yet final, hung in the air like a verdict, and for the first time Kirk's composure cracked completely. Tears spilled from his eyes as he dropped his hands, shaking his head, in disbelief. "No, no, Rasheeda, don't you say that. Don't end us like this. We've been through too much. We can't stop now, not like this." But she stood her ground, eyes locked on him with a mixture of pain and steel. "You ended us the moment. You chose lies over loyalty. Don't put this on me." The baby's cries softened into hiccups, Jasmine rocking her gently. And the juxtaposition of new life against the collapse of an old one painted a scene too heartbreaking for words. The hospital staff tried to usher people back, to reclaim some sense of order. But the spectacle was too magnetic, too heavy with history, and no one wanted to look away. Even strangers could feel the finality pressing into the room, the sense that something long held together by duct tape and denial had finally split open beyond repair. Kirk stepped forward again, his hands reaching as though he could physically hold onto the pieces of his crumbling marriage, but Rashida stepped back, her voice quiet but unwavering. "Don't touch me. Don't say another word unless it's the truth, the whole truth, because I'm done being fed lies." Kirk's lips parted, but no sound came out, his silence louder than any confession, and Jasmine's eyes darted between them, perhaps realizing that for once, This wasn't her fight, it was the wreckage of a love story built on fragile trust. And now, it was collapsing in flames before her. Outside in the hallway, whispers turned to shouts as word spread through the hospital that Rashida and Kirk were in a full-scale showdown. And fans would later describe it as the kind of chaos that only reality stars could bring. A mixture of heartbreak and spectacle so intense it felt scripted even though it was painfully real. Rashida took one last look at Kirk, her eyes red but dry, because she had no tears left to give. And she turned toward the door, her steps firm, her shoulders squared, her silence screaming louder than any words could. Kirk called after her, his voice cracking, "Please, don't leave, let's talk, let's fix this." But she didn't turn, didn't give him the mercy of a glance. The sound of her heels clicking down the hallway echoed like a gavel striking, final and absolute, and the room behind her collapsed into stunned quiet. Kirk sank into the chair nearest him, his hands covering his face, his body trembling with sobs he couldn't hide anymore, while Jasmine sat frozen, clutching her child, her eyes wide with the realization that the man she had thought might stand by her side was now drowning in the ruins of his marriage. The fans, the bloggers, the strangers all would spin their own narratives about who was to blame, about what should happen next, but in that room, the truth was simpler. A woman who had given her all had finally reached her breaking point, and a man who thought he could juggle two worlds now sat in the rubble of both. The echo of Rashida's heels down the sterile hallway haunted every corner of the hospital, a sound that lingered in Kirk's chest like a hammer beating against his ribs. And though she had disappeared from sight, the aftermath of her storm still rattled through the room, leaving Jasmine stiff with unease and Kirk unraveling in front of dozens of silent, wide-eyed strangers. He sat hunched in the chair, hands dragging down his face, trying to breathe past the weight of humiliation, guilt, and fear, while Jasmine adjusted her baby's blanket, avoiding eye contact, as though she knew the longer she stayed in the chaos, the more dangerous it became. The onlookers, hungry for every detail, refused to disperse, their phones still raised to capture what was already destined to become viral footage. But their whispers only amplified Kirk's agony, each mutter about the end of Kirk and Rashida, slicing deeper than the last. Finally, he stood, his voice hoarse, muttering to no one in particular, "I can't let her walk out like that. Not like this," and with unsteady steps, he moved toward the door, leaving Jasmine behind with her baby as a fresh wave of tension rippled through the crowd. Outside in the corridor, Rashida's pace was brisk, her head held high despite the storm inside her, but Kirk's desperate call echoed again. "Rashida, wait." She froze, just for a second, the muscles in her shoulders tightening as though the sound of his voice alone was a wound reopening, and then she spun on her heel, her eyes blazing, her body trembling with fury. "You don't get to call my name like that anymore, Kirk. You don't get to stop me like I'm still yours." Her words sliced through the air, and the onlookers who had followed gasped collectively, already sensing they were about to witness another round of chaos. Kirk's chest rose and fell like a man sprinting uphill, his eyes wet as he begged, "Please, just give me a chance to explain. You don't understand, I didn't come here to disrespect you. I came here because I thought I owed it to that baby to at least check." But Rashida cut him off, her voice thundering so loud the walls practically shook. "Owed it to the baby? You owe me, Kirk. You owe me years of honesty, loyalty, and respect that you keep handing out to everyone else but me. Don't stand there and tell me about what you owe someone else, when the woman who built your life is standing right in front of you, broken, because of you." The words hit like gunfire, and Kirk staggered back as though the force of her pain had a physical impact, his hand reaching for the wall to steady himself, but he didn't dare step closer. Nurses tried again to usher the crowd away, but no one budged. Even hospital staff were secretly recording, their professionalism overtaken by the magnetic pull of celebrity scandal unfolding before their eyes. Rashida took a sharp breath, her voice cracking now, betraying the tears she had fought to hold back. "You think this is about one visit, one baby? No, Kirk, this is about every time you told me I was crazy for suspecting. Every time you swore you were a changed man, every time I sat at home defending you to the world while you were proving me wrong behind my back. This hospital is just the latest stage for your betrayal, but I'm done being your fool." Her voice broke completely on the word fool, and though she quickly straightened, wiping her face with the back of her hand, everyone watching could feel the deep fracture that years of heartbreak had carved into her. Kirk stepped forward, unable to stop himself, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "Rashida, please, you're the only woman I ever wanted to build a life with. I made mistakes, I know that, But don't erase everything we've been through. Don't let this be the end. His words trembled with sincerity, but Rashida's laugh, sharp, bitter, hollow, cut through them instantly. The end, Kirk. It's already over. You ended it the moment you put me second. The moment you chose lies over love. Don't stand here and beg for mercy you never gave me. Fans later described this moment as the dagger that killed any hope of reconciliation, the scene where Rashida's strength finally eclipsed her heartbreak. And for many, it was the most powerful image of the night. A woman refusing to crumble despite the weight of betrayal pressing her down. Kirk's voice faltered, his lips quivering as he whispered, "What do I have to do to make this right?" And the answer came instantly. Without hesitation. "You can't," Rashida said, her tone flat, final, as though the door between them had been slammed shut forever. At that moment, Erica Dixon, Rashida's longtime friend, arrived at the hospital, storming through the crowd with her fiery presence. Her eyes locked on Kirk, and without hesitation, she marched straight to Rashida's side, wrapping an arm protectively around her. "You don't owe him another second of your life, Rashida," Erica declared, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "He made his choice, and now he can live with it. You're worth more than this circus." The crowd erupted in murmurs again, many nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads, already debating the fallout, but Kirk looked like a man sinking into quicksand, unable to grasp onto anything solid as his world caved in. He tried to speak, but Erica cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't, just don't. Every word out of your mouth is another dagger in her back. Haven't you done enough?" Rashida leaned against her friend, her face pale but her posture unyielding, and for the first time that night she looked like she wasn't standing alone. Kirk's eyes darted desperately between them, but there was no space left for him, no room for excuses or promises. The cameras caught every second. Fans later dissecting Erica's entrance as the moment Rashida's backbone was reinforced. The moment she realized she didn't need Kirk's apologies to stand tall. "Come on," Erica whispered to her friend, guiding her away, and though Rashida's steps faltered with the weight of finality, she walked forward, leaving Kirk in the center of the hallway, abandoned, disgraced, and unraveling. The crowd parted for the women like they were royalty exiting a battlefield, and Kirk, left behind, sank to his knees against the cold linoleum, his sobs echoing down the corridor. Jasmine peeked out from her hospital room, clutching her baby tightly. Her eyes filled with a mix of triumph and fear, because while she had gotten her truth exposed, she also knew she was now part of a public firestorm that would consume her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The fans who later watched replay after replay would argue about whether Kirk deserved forgiveness, whether Jasmine was victim or villain, whether Rashida would truly leave for good. But in that moment, at the hospital, the truth was raw and undeniable. The Frost family had been torn apart, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hallway outside the maternity ward still buzzed with chaos after Rashida and Erica's exit. The crowd of strangers buzzing like a hive that had just been struck, everyone speaking at once, phones in the air, whispers and shouts ricocheting off the sterile walls, but the epicenter of it all was Kirk Frost. Still hunched against the wall, his hands pressed against his tear-stained face as though trying to block out the reality he had just helped create. For years he had been the man juggling two identities, the businessman, the family man, the husband who swore he was reformed, and the reckless partner who could never resist temptation. But now those two halves had collided in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. He felt the eyes of the onlookers burning into his back, the judgment searing deeper than any insult, and for the first time, he realized there was no spin, no quick apology, no grand gesture that could erase the fact that Rashida had finally walked away. Not in silence, not in confusion, but in a blaze of fury that left no room for hope. He muttered her name again under his breath, his voice hoarse, broken, as if repeating it might conjure her back into his orbit, but she was gone, swept away by the protective arm of Erica, and nothing he could do would bridge that distance now. Behind him, Jasmine lingered at her door, her baby now quiet against her chest, and though she tried to stay invisible, the cameras turned toward her, capturing her every twitch, her every glance. The mother at the center of the storm. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to remind the world that she had not forced Kirk's hand, but the words stuck in her throat as the enormity of the scandal weighed her down. She knew that once the footage left the hospital, once it hit the blogs and gossip sites, she would not be painted as a victim but as the villain, the woman who had once again pulled Kirk away from his wife and shattered a marriage fans had begged to survive. A nurse approached her gently, urging her to return to her room, but even that simple act felt heavy with judgment. As though every person in that building had already picked a side. Inside, Kirk pushed himself to his feet, staggering down the hallway in the direction Rashida had gone, desperate to catch even a glimpse of her before she left for good. He stumbled past security, past the crowd, his voice trembling as he called out, "Rashida, please, just give me 5 minutes, just 5 minutes to explain." But by the time he reached the front lobby, the cold reality hit him like a punch. To the gut, she was gone. The automatic doors were still sliding shut. And through the glass, he caught one last glimpse of Erica guiding her into a car waiting outside. Rashida's head held high, despite the tears streaking her cheeks. The car pulled away into the night, the headlights cutting across his face, and Kirk felt the finality sink in like concrete. Fans watching later would describe this moment as the most cinematic breakup in reality TV history. The shot of Kirk standing in the hospital lobby, defeated and alone, while Rashida's car disappeared into the distance, a visual metaphor for the end of an era. He collapsed into a chair in the waiting area, his body shaking with sobs, ignoring the flashing cameras and the whispered commentary around him, because for once he had no performance left, no defense to offer, only the raw grief of a man who had destroyed the one thing he could never rebuild. Erica's words echoed in his head. Rashida's fury replayed in loops. Jasmine's accusations stabbed at his pride, but none of it compared to the hollow space in his chest where his marriage used to live. Back upstairs, Jasmine sat in silence, rocking her baby as the chatter outside her door grew louder. Her face pale as she realized she was not just raising a child, but raising one in the shadow of a scandal that would define her for years. She thought of the headlines that would spin out of control, the angry comments that would flood her social media, the whispers that would follow her to the grocery store and beyond, and a part of her wished Kirk had never walked through that hospital door at all. Meanwhile, Rashida sat in Erica's car, her phone buzzing relentlessly with messages from friends, from family, from fans who had already seen the leaked clips, but she ignored them all, staring out the window with silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Erica reached over, squeezing her hand gently. "You're stronger than this, and you don't need him anymore," she whispered, and though Rashida nodded, a part of her heart still ached, still wrestled with the history, the memories, the years she had invested. She wondered if the world would ever understand the exhaustion of carrying a love that refused to stay whole, of patching cracks that never stopped spreading. She whispered to herself, "I can't go back. Not this time," and the conviction in her tone was stronger than any vow she had ever made. Back at the hospital, fans who had witnessed the showdown began uploading their shaky footage, each angle capturing a different shard of the implosion, and within minutes the internet was ablaze. Hashtags like #RASHEEDA deserves better and #Kirk exposed trended globally, while debates raged in comment sections and live streams, some defending Kirk as a flawed man trying to do right by his child, others demanding Rashida finally leave him behind for good. The frenzy grew so intense that news outlets picked up the story, blurring the line between reality show scandal and national headline. And the Frost family name became synonymous not with business ventures or music, but with betrayal broadcast. In high definition, Kirk eventually left the hospital under the cover of night, slipping out a side entrance with his hoodie pulled low. But even in the shadows, paparazzi cameras caught him, his face streaked with tears, his body slumped with defeat. The photos plastered across the internet only fueled the narrative of a man broken by his own choices. A man who had finally run out of second chances. Rashida, meanwhile, retreated into the safety of her home, locking her phone away, surrounding herself with friends who refused to let her collapse. And though the world speculated endlessly about whether she would file for divorce, she offered no public statement, her silence becoming more powerful than any interview. Jasmine remained at the hospital, her newborn shielded from the frenzy. But she too became the subject of ruthless commentary, her name dragged across timelines, her intentions questioned, her dignity stripped by strangers who only knew her through scandal. And as the dust settled in the days that followed, one truth became clear. The night at the hospital had not just been a fight, not just a scandal, but a turning point that split the Frost family into before and after, a moment that fans would remember for years as the night everything finally fell apart. The night did not end when Rashida sped away from that hospital parking lot, because in many ways it was only the beginning of the storm that would swallow Atlanta whole. And as the flashing lights from dozens of phones and cameras followed, her taillights disappearing into the dark. Kirk was left standing like a man stripped bare in front of the world. Kai's words echoing in his chest louder than the sirens of distant ambulances, louder than the whispers of strangers who pointed and shook their heads, louder than Jasmine's quiet sobs upstairs as she rocked her baby and wondered if she had been a fool to think this man could ever protect her or the child she had brought into the world. And those ripples of pain traveled far and wide in the hours that followed, because by dawn, every blog, gossip site, and entertainment page was ablaze with headlines screaming about Rashida confronting her husband at the hospital. Fans dissecting every shaky video clip uploaded from waiting room witnesses. Some swearing they heard Rashida say she was finished, for good, others insisting she was giving Kirk one last chance to redeem himself, and the comments poured in like a flood. People choosing sides. People writing essays about loyalty, betrayal, motherhood, fatherhood, the collapse of a family built in the public eye. And while the online world feasted on speculation, the real people at the center of it were left shattered in ways that no headline could fully capture, because Rashida sat alone in her car miles away, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles whitened, her tears blurring the road ahead until she had to pull over. And in that silence she asked herself questions she had avoided for years. Why did she keep forgiving? Why did she keep hoping? Why did she still love a man who seemed addicted to breaking her? And even as her chest heaved with sobs, a part of her already feared that love would pull her back again, no matter how much she wanted to be done, while Kirk drove home hours later like a ghost behind the wheel, his phone buzzing endlessly with missed calls from PR teams, angry texts from friends, and one message from Jasmine begging him to at least acknowledge the child he had left crying in that hospital, and he realized with a sick twist in his gut that no matter where he turned, he was the villain now. The man who had betrayed not just his wife but his children, his fans, his legacy, and when he finally pulled into his driveway, he was met not with peace but with the sight of neighbors standing on their porches, watching him, whispering, judging, and the weight of their stares made his knees weak. Yet, worse still was walking into his own home and finding silence where there should have been warmth. Because Rashida had not returned and the house smelled of absence. The kind of void that tells a man he might have lost more than he can ever recover. And as hours bled into days, the chaos only grew, because Rashida's mother called her live on Instagram, telling fans that her daughter deserved better, while Jasmine's cousin leaked private messages to blogs proving Kirk had promised to be there for the baby, sparking outrage across the internet. And Kai, still furious, posted a cryptic tweet saying blood doesn't make you a father, actions do, which went viral within minutes, dragging Kirk's name through the mud in ways that money and spin could not fix. And yet the most explosive twist came when an old friend of Jasmine's claimed Kirk had been sneaking financial support to her long before the baby was born, raising questions about how deep the betrayal really ran. And fans were stunned, emotions ran high, and the family was left more divided than ever. Because every new detail felt like another knife to Rashida's, and as whispers turned into roars, the hospital chaos spread far beyond the walls where it began, morphing into a citywide conversation, then a nationwide spectacle. And by the end of that week, Kirk and Rashida's fractured marriage was no longer just a family tragedy but a trending saga, dissected on talk shows, radio stations, and live stream rants where fans argued passionately about who was right, who was wrong, and whether true love could survive such relentless betrayal. While deep inside her own silence, Rashida tried to rebuild the pieces of herself that had been shattered that night, locking herself away in the guest room of a close friend, refusing Kirk's calls, refusing interviews, and refusing to give the world another glimpse of her pain until she had decided whether she could endure another round of humiliation. Yet even as she hid, the public could not stop reaching for her story. Their hunger for drama fed by every leak, every screenshot, every shaky video clip that painted Kirk as careless and cold. And still the man at the center of it all staggered from one bad decision to another, retreating into nights spent in dim clubs where paparazzi cameras caught him looking hollow-eyed, sipping drinks while whispers followed him like shadows, his reputation crumbling with every photo uploaded to the blogs. And Jasmine, carrying the weight of her newborn daughter, felt the backlash in ways she could never have imagined, because fans flooded her pages with insults, calling her a homewrecker, questioning her motives, doubting her sincerity. And though she tried to remind herself that she had simply fallen for a man who promised her the world, she could not escape the glare of being the woman who cracked open a marriage already wounded by history. But perhaps the deepest wound of all was carried by Kai, who avoided his father altogether, his silence speaking volumes on social media. His absence from family gatherings noticed by fans who speculated that the rift was permanent, and when Rashida's mother spoke in an emotional live stream about protecting her grandchildren from the fallout of their father's mistakes, the public sided even more firmly with Rashida, lifting her as a symbol of strength, while Kirk became the poster child for selfishness. But still, the story refused to settle, because new twists kept unfolding like scenes written by fate itself, with one insider claiming that Rashida had quietly visited a divorce attorney, another insisting she was secretly meeting with Kirk late at night, and yet another swearing she had moved her belongings out of their home, and all these rumors tangled together until no one knew the full truth. Only that a woman's heart was in ruins, a man's name was in tatters, and a child's cry had sparked a scandal too big to be contained. And as days turned into weeks, the chaos showed no signs of dying. For even when Kirk finally broke his silence in a shaky live stream, where he begged for forgiveness and swore he would fight for his family, the reaction was mixed, with some fans calling him pathetic and too late, while others admitted they saw genuine regret in his eyes. Yet Rashida's silence remained louder than any apology, her refusal to respond making fans wonder if she was finished for good. And when paparazzi finally spotted her stepping out in public, her head held high and her ring finger bare, the internet exploded with speculation that this was the end, that Rashida had finally chosen herself over the cycle of betrayal. But no sooner had fans accepted that possibility than another twist emerged, with reports that Kirk had been seen visiting her at a private location, fueling rumors of a reconciliation. And suddenly the entire world was back on edge, debating whether Rashida would forgive him yet again or whether she was only tying up loose ends before walking away forever. And through it all, the baby girl at the center of the storm remained, the most heartbreaking reminder of how complicated love can become. A tiny life that had unknowingly drawn battle lines across families, forcing people to take sides, forcing a woman to face her deepest pain, forcing a man to confront the consequences of his choices. And as this saga played out under the unforgiving eye of the public, one truth became undeniable. The chaos that started in a hospital room had grown into a saga of loyalty, betrayal, and survival that left fans breathless, families divided, and the future more uncertain than ever. Because until Rashida herself spoke, no one could say whether this story would end with forgiveness or finality, and that silence kept the entire world watching, waiting, and bracing for the next eruption that could change everything once again. And while the world waited for Rashida to break her silence, the tension around her home life grew heavier, pressing down on every member of her family until even ordinary moments felt like scenes from a battlefield. Because when she finally returned to the house she had once shared with Kirk, she moved with the caution of someone stepping through broken glass. Ignoring his attempts at small talk, refusing to look him in the eye, her energy cold enough to freeze him mid-sentence. And still Kirk followed her, begging under his breath for another chance, whispering that he couldn't bear to lose her, but every word sounded hollow against the memory of that hospital night. And Rashida's refusal to engage only added fuel to the fire of speculation, with fans insisting she was preparing her exit in silence. And even those closest to her felt the shift, her friends noticing how she smiled less, her children picking up on the tension that hung in the air, the weight of betrayal seeping into every corner of their lives. While Kirk continued to drown in guilt, avoiding interviews, canceling appearances, and shutting himself in his studio for long nights that produced nothing but empty drafts. And in the shadows, Jasmine struggled to her baby girl's cries, filling nights that were already heavy with judgment from the outside world. Her phone lighting up with hateful comments that called her selfish, manipulative, and cruel. Yet beneath all the noise, she wrestled with a private heartbreak of her own, realizing that despite everything Kirk had promised, she was still alone, raising a child in the ruins of his broken vows. And as days blurred into nights, the gossip only grew louder. Talk shows debating Rashida's next move, fans dissecting every public sighting, paparazzi camping outside studios and salons, hoping for a glimpse of her bare ring finger. And through it all, Rashida remained unshaken, walking past cameras without a word. Her silence, a weapon sharper than any rant could ever be, while Kirk looked more and more like a man on the verge of collapse. His shoulders slumped, his words rehearsed but meaningless, his attempts at damage control drowned by a chorus of fans who had already chosen sides. And just when it seemed the dust might settle, another twist erupted, this time from within the family itself, because Kai, still furious, broke his silence. In a raw interview where he admitted he no longer saw Kirk as a father figure, his voice cracking as he spoke about watching his mother suffer again and again. And that honesty pierced deeper than any gossip blog ever could, because it revealed the true cost of Kirk's choices. The fracture between a father and his son, and fans wept as the clip went viral. Their sympathy for Rashida deepening while their patience for Kirk vanished. And even Kirk himself, watching from the solitude of his home, could not stop the tears that rolled down his cheeks. Realizing he had not only lost his wife's trust but his son's respect, and perhaps his own sense of self, yet still he clung to hope, reaching out to Rashida in letters, in late-night calls she never answered, in public statements that felt more like rehearsed speeches than heartfelt apologies. But Rashida had grown weary of words, weary of empty promises, weary of living a life where love was always tangled with betrayal. And as she sat one night staring at the city skyline from a friend's balcony, she told herself for the first time that maybe letting go wasn't weakness but the only path left to peace, though her heart still trembled at the thought of breaking apart the family she had fought so long to hold together. And so the story teetered on the edge, a marriage dangling between survival and collapse, a family divided, a baby girl caught in the middle, and an audience of millions leaning forward, desperate for resolution. And yet the silence stretched on, unanswered questions piling higher with every passing day, until the saga no longer belonged just to the people living it but to the world that refused to look away. And that hunger for answers became the heartbeat of the scandal. A drumbeat that would not stop until Rashida herself finally chose to speak, to reveal whether her story was one of forgiveness or final goodbye. And until that moment came, the chaos that began at a hospital would continue to echo, raw and unresolved, across every headline, every home, and every heart that had been pulled into the storm. Heart. Another reason for Kai to pull further away. Another reason for the public to demand answers. But instead of clarity, the situation grew darker, because Kirk remained silent, avoiding cameras, avoiding fans, avoiding his own reflection in the mirror, while Rashida considered her options, divorce papers whispered about by friends, counseling suggested by family, silence chosen by her own wounded heart, and Jasmine, caught in the middle, found herself painted as both victim and villain, a woman who had given birth to innocence yet was drowning in guilt. And through it all the baby remained the most heartbreaking detail, a tiny life born into chaos, innocent eyes staring up at a world already set aflame. And the truth was, no matter how many cameras captured the shouting, no matter how many fans debated betrayal, no matter how many headlines screamed scandal, the real story was about the fracture of trust, the unraveling of love, and the question that no one could answer: could Rashida ever forgive? Could Kirk ever change? Or had this hospital chaos marked the final chapter of a marriage that had endured too much already? And as the sun rose on yet another day of speculation, the players in this drama were forced to face a reality far harsher than any reality show could script, because this time there were no retakes, no producers to soften the blow, only raw pain, shattered trust, and a family standing at the edge of collapse with the whole world watching, waiting, and wondering what would happen next. The shouting match inside the hospital had burned itself into exhaustion, but the story was far from over, because once the initial chaos simmered, the fallout began spreading like wildfire across Atlanta. Rashida stormed out of the ward, first, her heels striking the floor with sharp cracks, every step declaring she was done tolerating humiliation. Kirk tried following her, but the sight of fans already swarming the lobby with their phones out made him hesitate, his face tense, knowing the whole world was about to see him exposed in ways he couldn't spin. Jasmine stayed behind, cradling her daughter, but the whispers from nearby nurses and relatives made her cheeks burn with shame, because no matter how she tried to defend herself, she couldn't escape being labeled the villain who had come between husband and wife. By the time Rashida reached the parking lot, tears had finally broken through the icy mask she'd worn upstairs, and her close friend Erica, who had raced to the hospital the moment she heard, was there to wrap her arms around her, whispering that she deserved better, stronger, more than the endless cycle of betrayals Kirk kept dragging her into. Fans who had gathered outside gasped when they saw Rashida break down, some even shouting words of encouragement, while others hurled angry accusations at Kirk, calling him selfish, careless, and a disgrace to his family. But what made the night spiral even further was what happened when Kirk finally stepped outside and was confronted not just by the cameras, but by his own son, Kai, who had arrived late after hearing rumors online and was now staring at his father with a mix of disgust and disbelief. The father-son standoff was more brutal than any argument between adults, because the raw pain in Kai's voice cut deeper than Rashida's anger. "You keep choosing her over us," he said, his voice breaking as the crowd fell silent. "And I'm done pretending you're a man I can look up to." Kirk's shoulders sagged under the weight of that moment, his hands trembling. But before he could answer, Rashida turned her back and climbed into her car, the engine roaring as she sped away, leaving Kirk standing in the flashing lights of camera phones, looking like a man who had finally realized he might have lost everything. Fans were left stunned, the family was left divided, and the hospital that had started the day in silence now carried the echoes of a scandal that no one would forget.